We're going to jump into the sixth week of our series, Love Like Jesus. But I want you to know there's a great resource available. There's a book by Aaron Chambers. That's with two R's, A-A-R-R. O-N. I'm about to choke on a peanut. Hang on. Get you every time. All right. So, but Aaron Chambers wrote a book a number of years ago called Eats with Sinners, and as we've gone through the Gospel of Luke, we are also kind of looking at some of the things that he highlights out of that Gospel, and it's just been a good study and reminders for me, and if you'd like to dig a little deeper into that, I hope you get that book. But he talks about this idea of having persistence. If we're going to love like Jesus, we got to have a persistent love, and not quit. And he says there's a lot of quitters out there, a lot of famous quitters, actually. You can think about different people that you know that have stopped doing something that they seemed good at, maybe high profile. Have to go back a number of years. You look in history, maybe you read about Richard Nixon, left the White House after he was elected to a second term, but because of the Watergate scandal, he quit being the president. Maybe you remember, a lot of you were in North Carolina, basketball fans, Michael Jordan, greatest player to ever play the game of basketball, quit basketball to play professional baseball. I mean, that's nuts, okay? And luckily he came back to playing some basketball and coaching all those things. King Edward VIII, you can go back right before the World War II, and he's king of England for less than a year, and in 1936 decides that he's going to abdicate the throne to chase after his married lover, Wallis Simpson. Or maybe, and I guess just England's got a bad rap for people who quit, but Jerry Halliwell, I don't know if you remember Jerry Halliwell, in the 90s, she was part of the group, the Spice Girls. She was Ginger Spice and brought all that girl power and everything, and then at the height of their commercial success, doesn't have peanuts in it, does it? All right. So I was I'm going to choke on that thing. The trail mix, man, it's just, don't eat that right before you preach. I'm just saying. But she quit the Spice Girls at the height of their career, and it was sort of unexplainable. How about Florence Chadwick? Anybody know her? Probably not, but let me introduce you to her. In 1952, Florence Chadwick attempted to be the first woman to swim the 26 miles between Catalina Island and the California coastline. She had a big reputation of being a long-distance swimmer, and she was determined to go out and do this, and during her swim, she was surrounded by a small fleet of boats that would sort of protect her from sharks, I'm not sure how, and rescue her if she grew tired. But after 15 hours of swimming towards the coast, a thick fog bank kind of settled in over the water, and she was starting to get a little disoriented. She was well trained. She was definitely ready to finish the race, but the fog so disoriented her, it made her doubt her ability to reach the coast. And an hour later, Florence's disappointment grew, and she decided to be pulled from the water. But it made it even worse when they realized, and the fog lifted, that she was less than a mile from the coast. Have you ever felt like quitting? Maybe you set a goal to exercise more, so you got a gym membership. You bought a treadmill, but if you've noticed the way that I've noticed, you bought that treadmill and now it's in the garage or it's in the side bedroom, and that's where you hang clean laundry. You know what I'm talking about? Nobody uses their treadmill, do they? All right, I see that all the time. Or people get the gym membership and they have full intentions to go, but after a month or so, it just sort of sits there in your wallet unused. Or maybe it was a diet. You started, real strong. You're I'm going to eat nothing but salad, right? With no dressing, just raw, and your fridge was full of good, clean food or shakes or, pantry full of rice cakes. I don't know what you do. But after a few weeks, you start throwing in like I do, there's a few cheeseburgers in there or can't pass up a bag of chips. And it's been so long, might as well eat the whole bag. And, or you go by and order pizza a few times, and next thing you know, you're right back where you started, and you've sort of quit. And we don't set out to quit when we start, but it just sort of happens. Maybe your commitment was stronger. Maybe your commitment was to honor and cherish in sickness and in health until death do us part. And there's never really been a couple who said those words that expected not to fulfill them, or that one day they'd be loading a moving truck to leave her. Never would she leave him a note that says, I don't love you anymore. Not them, never. But over and over again, you and I have observed it. Maybe some of you have lived it. Maybe after a few years, maybe after a few kids, when it comes to marriage, you call it quits. There's another commitment that many of you in the room have made, and that is the commitment to follow Jesus as your Lord. You made that decision to die to yourself, to live for Christ, to turn your back on your old sinful life and let him reign as your Lord. And nobody forced you into that decision. It was your own free will. You decided that you were going to turn away from your past and turn your face towards Christ. But you and I also know there were some people who made that decision, and they're not here today. They're not in any church today. Because somewhere along the way, after their tearful confession of making Jesus Lord and being baptized into him, they changed their mind. They kind of went back to living without him, to their old way of life. And even among those of us who are still in the faith and committed to Jesus, you understand we accepted a mission when we joined up with Jesus. We accepted his plans for our lives, and that included the thing that he came to earth to do, which was to seek and save lost people. And so we committed from that day forward that we were going to spend time with people who are far from God, that they might learn about Jesus through our faith, through our actions, that we would spend time with people like eating with sinners, praying with them, sharing our faith, so that, like us, they might come to know Jesus as Savior. Friend, what would it take to rekindle the fire you had in your belly when you came to follow Jesus, that determination that, man, you're going to tell everybody you knew? You got into this brand new relationship with Jesus. You're inviting your neighbors. You got family members. You guys come to our church. You tell them, when did that wear down? And what would it look like to once again be determined, to have that enthusiasm, to have that resolve that you're going to do whatever it takes to finish strong, not just in your walk with Jesus, but to help other people find him too. I'd love for us to learn from the most famous non-quitter in history today. His name is Jesus. Jesus had a very clear goal in mind as he begins the second half of his earthly ministry. Lasted about 3 years, and about a year and a half in, he really sort of upped the intensity. He changed gears, so to speak. The Gospel of John spends more than half of its content just in this second half of the ministry, half of the Gospel of Luke. And he made it very, very clear, starting at that moment, that his sole focus was two things. He was going to die on a cross to pay for the sins of humanity. And he was going to go to heaven to prepare a place for all those who would have faith in him to live with him forever. And nothing was going to deter him from that goal. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, in one verse that we're going to read together and really focus on together, there's a little bit more we'll read, but this one main verse it sets a milestone in the ministry of Jesus, and it's what I really want us to focus on and hone in on. So as we read it, I want you to pay attention in your Bible, in your electronic Bible app. Make sure you underline this verse. Luke 9, verse 51. As the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. This was not just a phrase to say, hey, his next stop was Jerusalem, but this was to sort of put a bookmark and say, from this point forward, things changed. His goal was very clearly in mind. He was resolutely set out for Jerusalem. What it literally means, his face was directed towards that city. But not just that city, all the inevitable things that he was going to do there and do leading up to his approach, knowing Jerusalem is where he would die, and he faced it down without any fear. Knowing that that's where he was resolved to complete his work, no matter what. What's your face set on? What's that thing that you're going to achieve no matter what gets in your way? Maybe it is to lose 20 pounds, you know? And when I'm committing to this, maybe it's just exercising more. Maybe you want to learn a new language or play an instrument. Maybe you're working really hard to get out of debt and with just intensity, right? Maybe you're wanting to work more or work less, right? Pursue your career and kind of take on that challenge, or maybe it's your career's kind of consuming you. You're committed to like spending a little bit more time in rest or with your family and your faith. Maybe it's fixing your marriage or working on your relationship with God. All of those are noble goals to set your face to. They're all worthy of achieving. Jesus' face was set on a cross just outside of town, and nothing was going to deter him from fulfilling that mission. Nothing would stop him. If we're going to be like him, then nothing's going to stop us from living like him and from reaching people who are lost. But goals are easier to set than they are to achieve, right? You set goals all the time, right? And I mean, it has to start there. You have to set it. You can't just keep it to yourself either. Like you have to, when you set a goal, you speak it out loud to people that you care about. You write it down and put it in a place where you can see it regularly, right? Setting a goal isn't just thinking, oh, that might be a good idea, but it's setting a goal. But setting a goal is just the beginning of the journey. Staying with it, that's the challenge, right? Just ask Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison's face was set on the light bulb, but when he first attended school, he was considered a slow student. All of his teachers complained he'd never really amount to anything, but this remedial student went on to produce more than 1,300 different inventions and all the patents that associated with it. In the process of inventing the light bulb, Edison tried 2,000 different experiments. One young reporter of his day asked him how it felt to fail so many times, and Edison's response was remarkable. He said, I didn't fail a single time. I invented the light bulb. It was a 2,000-step process, right? He had a clear goal in mind. He was persistent to do whatever it took to reach that goal. So far as we know, he's not remembered for his whining or his complaining, and he wasn't a quitter. What's your goal? What's your face set on? That no matter how many times you try, you're going to try again until you succeed. It's my goal and my hope for Compass Christian Church to reach as many people as possible for Jesus Christ. That means we're eating with as many sinners as possible, right? We're endeavoring to connect with people who don't know Jesus. And you need to know, if we're really going to commit to that goal as a church and as individuals, it's going to take persistence. It won't always come easily. It's going to take resolve on your part, not only to achieve that goal for yourself, but for us to achieve it together. And we will face obstacles on the way to Jerusalem, because Jesus did. What is your Jerusalem? Yes, your Jerusalem. What is it that God has marked out as your sort of spiritual destiny, the plans he has made for you? And it's your choice whether you choose that path or not, but this is the path that he has marked out for you to follow. What's going to stand in your way of getting there? Because that path might lead you to extraordinary service, might lead you to significant sacrifice. It might, I can probably guarantee you, it leads to a higher purpose than anything you and I might choose for ourselves. It's why we were placed on this planet. The Jerusalem is that most important thing, more important than any other goal we might ever set for ourselves. Your Jerusalem might be reaching somebody who's really far from God, right? They could be across the street in your neighborhood. They could be across the Pacific Ocean, a country you've never visited. Your Jerusalem might be your most annoying neighbor, the one you know that you're convinced wants to like poison your dog. I mean, you think, that person, the person that I totally don't like? Your Jerusalem might be at a family reunion, or it might be 3 cubicles away. Your Jerusalem might be receiving divorce papers this week because you just served them. Your Jerusalem might be a place of indescribable joy or unbelievable suffering. We don't get to pick what it is. We just decide if we're going to resolve ourselves to get there. For Jesus, Jerusalem, listen, it meant death. It meant suffering. It meant crucifixion. He had every reason to want to avoid it. But that was his target. Because that, even though it meant death for him, it meant life for us. And so he was determined. What are you resolved to do? They encountered some obstacles. Jesus went ahead and sent messengers on who went into the Samaritan village to get things ready for him. They were going to travel from Galilee in the north straight down to Jerusalem. They were running a little behind schedule, and the only way to make it to Jerusalem in time for the festival was going to be to go through that shortcut. Verse 53 says, "But the people there did not welcome him because he was headed for Jerusalem." Jews and Samaritans didn't get along for centuries, and it would have been common for Jewish people to try to take that shortcut while at the same time not wanting to have anything to do with Samaritan people. Well, they took that as a big insult, so they said, no, you can't just pass through here. You're a pilgrim. You need to take the long way around if you're not going to show us the dignity of respect. So when the disciples, James and John, saw this, verse 54, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to destroy them?" But Jesus turned to rebuke them. Then he and the disciples went to another town. Now, this is a little extreme. Let me kind of unpack this a little bit. When Jesus, we read about in John chapter 4, went through Samaria a previous time, he actually sat down in a well and met a woman there who's Samaritan and had this amazing conversation with her. And go back and read in John chapter 4. And she ends up going back into town and telling everybody to come out, "Hey, I think I've met the Messiah." And many believed in Jesus. And Jesus performed miracles and healed their sick and all these things, spent a few days with them. It was an amazing thing. Why, less than a year later, are these people not even willing to have Jesus pass through? Well, part of it might be they didn't know it was Jesus. They just knew it was a big group of pilgrims, headed down to Jerusalem, and we're not going to have any of that. But regardless of what their motivation was, they were missing out on a big blessing by rejecting Jesus, okay? They're showing animosity. They're following the cultural divide. Look at James and John. Let's kill them, right? As if they had the power to bring down like fire and brimstone and lightning, on these people. They don't even have that power, but what are they thinking, It's awful. Were they even listening when Jesus said in Luke chapter 6, and he said, "I tell you the truth," right? Listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, right? Like what got in their head that they're supposed to hate people that don't agree with them? I mean, who would do that? Until election season, right? And Christians somehow get the idea that anybody who disagrees with us on a godly principle or a biblical teaching or just outright doesn't agree that Jesus is the Messiah, that somehow our job is to hate them or to call for their murder, right? That seems very extreme. I mean, maybe we would have understood, like James and John saying, "Hey, they're going to have a festival here. Let's pray it rains on them." Or better yet, maybe a big flock of Canadian geese can just kind of hover over top of them for a little while and drop a few bombs. I don't know. Like that would at least seem like, hey, we want to ignore them. Can we just unfriend them, right? Can we just post an angry face on their post? Jesus rebukes them because he wants these Samaritans to live the same way he wants us to live. And he wants them to experience the good news like he wants us to experience. He wants to die on a cross for them just like he would have died for you or me. And these disciples, they get all ticked off and all bent out of shape, but Jesus came to seek people who are far from him, so he rebukes his disciples. He's not going to let anything get in his way. They just go on to another town and they keep going. But don't we get sidetracked sometimes doing the same thing? And we think that it becomes our job to hate or to cast judgment on people that disagree with us. It's not. We need to have the same resolve as Jesus that we're not going to let a little opposition deter us from our goal. And all these obstacles that present themselves. Listen, sometimes we do this. We think God's blessing equates with the ease of the journey. And if I encounter something difficult or painful, somehow in our minds as Christians, we've convinced ourselves, oh, this must not be God's will. If it was God's will, it would be easy. Where do you get that idea? Right? Where do you get that idea that if you're not wealthy enough to cover all your bills and everything that you want to do, or you're not pain-free and clean bill of health, that somehow you're outside of God's will. You're not doing what he wants. You might be right exactly in the path that you're supposed to be, and he's not going to remove every obstacle. He wants us to be persistent to go past them. Don't assume that if you're uncomfortable that that's not God's will. Read the Bible. He almost never calls people to do things that are simple and easy. And Jesus didn't, but he wasn't going to allow those obstacles to sway him from his goal. So even when you face resistance, be persistent. When you're in the middle of a race, I don't know if you guys ever run 5K or, quick dashes or anything like that, any athletes or anything, but here's what people don't say when they're competing in a race. They don't say, hey, you know what? I'm halfway there. Done. Right? Because you can't win if you stop halfway. It's not about you ran really well the first half of the race. You got to get to the finish line. In fact, a lot of people, especially long-distance runners, it's not even whether they place first or second. It's just about completing the race. And you and I know all kinds of people who might have grown up in church or hearing about God's love or the gospel and gone to church their whole lives. Maybe they even decide to follow Jesus on their own and get baptized. But somewhere along the way, they're not dead yet, but they're done with Jesus. Why does that happen? Well, either they never made their parents' faith their own, or they never let what they saw happening at the church penetrate their own hearts. Maybe they went off to college and were convinced by some professor to abandon all of their traditional beliefs. Whatever it was, they've never been committed to Christ since then. Maybe they lost a job. Maybe they lost their health. Maybe somebody who was close to them died an untimely death. Regardless of what it was, it disrupted their faith, and they're not following Jesus today. We are not the first people to experience that. And in the early church, Paul, writing to the Philippian church, he says, listen, don't quit. Don't quit before you've attained the prize that God had for you. Otherwise, not only do we become quitters, but other people are going to miss out on heaven because we stopped trying to reach them. This is what he says in Philippians chapter 3. Look what Paul calls the quitters. He says, for as I have often told you before and now say again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Yikes. He says their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach. Their glory is in their shame. Their mind is on earthly things, but our citizenship is in heaven. We eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who, by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control, will transform our lowly bodies so that we will be like his glorious body. Therefore, brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and my crown, this is how you should stand firm in the Lord, my dear friends. Who does Paul say is an enemy of the cross of Christ? People whose minds are on earthly things. And the fact that he has tears over it suggests that Paul is thinking of Christians who have turned their backs on Jesus. Either they've given up because of the obstacles they face, or because they've grown satisfied and complacent with their level of maturity, which inevitably leads to rebellion So that slow fade has a way of tempting us into sin and sucking us back into the life we left behind. And Paul says, no, because their minds aren't on Jesus, their minds are on their appetites. All their goals are temporary, worldly things. They may not even be bad things themselves, but if they don't lead us closer to Jesus, they don't lead other people into the kingdom, then they are extremely temporary. The good guys in Paul's writing are people who remember, hey, you know what? We belong to a new kingdom now. We're citizens of heaven, and we want to be persistent in loving people like Jesus. We want to finish this race so we're not disqualified. We want to help other people start this race and chase after a prize that never fades. So not only do we want to be persistent even when we face resistance, we want, even when we feel like quitting, to be persistent. See, it's not that everybody experiences big obstacles. Some of us, we just get tired of running. I don't like running, right? I would much rather, do pretty much anything but run, okay? But I do know that if I went out to start running like a race or a 5K right now, I'm not sure I could finish it, okay? Some of you are like marathon runners. Man, God bless you. You are incredible human beings, okay? But if I was going to get there, it would take a load of training. And I think sometimes for the Christian life, we set out with all the right intentions to run after Jesus, but then we start experiencing genuine exhaustion because we don't really know how to keep up this pace, or we don't really know how to sustain ourselves. As much as we want to be like Jesus, as much as we might really have a heart to seek after people who are far from God, we really want to do that. But if that's our goal, we've got to make sure we don't get off course. Because when you stop focusing on Jesus, we're going to be tempted to focus on fulfilling our appetites in other ways. Francis Chan writes this. He says, imagine going for a run while eating a box of Twinkies. By the way, we don't even have to imagine. In North Carolina, there is actually the Krispy Kreme run. Do not recommend. Okay. But besides eating a box of Twinkies while you're running, being, from a health point of view, not good for you, right? Any calories you're going to burn running, you're going to put back in because you're eating these side-splitting, awful, amazing things. And if you don't want to choke to death, you probably have to just outright stop running to sit and consume it, and then you could resume running again. Well, here's the analogy. It's exactly the same thing. Somebody like you or me is determined to follow Jesus with all of our focus and attention. In order to sin, we have to stop running towards Jesus and turn towards this other thing that's rebellion. You just can't do both at the same time. Not like you're fully following Jesus and then you decide that you're going to dive straight into the old life you left behind. You're only focused on one of those at a time. And so it requires a departure from our focus on Christ in order to run back towards our sin. But not only that, when we are trying to pursue Jesus, if our focus is on what we're leaving behind, that'll wear you out too. All right? If you're still focused on your past, you're just trying to run away from the guilt or the shame that you feel, you're trying to just get free of the trouble that seems to be constantly following behind. If your focus is on your past, you're not pursuing Jesus either. And that's an exhausting way to follow him. And so one of the things we have to learn if we're going to chase after Jesus is that, listen, he has completely removed that past. You don't need to live in that any longer. You can live exclusively for Jesus. And anytime our minds try to focus back on earthly things, remember what Paul says. Listen, that would make us opposed to the cross of Christ. That's a waste of time and energy. But not only that, like good things, like I want to focus on my retirement. I want to have a better family or a better marriage. I want to get out of debt. All these other kind of things that can be good things, when they become our main focus, also make us enemies of the cross because he's not the most important thing. It's not how God wanted us to live. That's not what Jesus died for us to experience. And it seems radical because it is really radical. It is a very countercultural way to live, that instead of pursuing the exact same things that non-Christians in our culture pursue, that Christians would pursue something different. When you stop and think about it that way, it seems obvious, but I wouldn't call it common. When we begin to focus more on Jesus and loving like him and loving others like him, he becomes our focus. We actually experience the satisfaction that God wants for us to have. Listen, there is no life that is obstacle-free. There is no life that won't eventually exhaust you. But Jesus' life for you is the only one that will satisfy and the only one that will carry on into eternity. It's a marathon. It's a lifelong commitment. So don't give up. No matter how difficult it might be, don't stop pursuing Jesus. No matter how hard it might seem, don't stop trying to reach others for Jesus too. And I understand. You might have asked somebody 400 times to come to church. What's it going to take to ask them the 401st time? You might have been praying for your friend or your loved one for years. You don't see any signs of changing. You stay persistent. Don't quit. Might even be your spouse. In fact, I want you to see a story about that very thing. Take a look.
Shawn Michaels was born to be a superstar. Shawn Michaels is the most decorated superstar in history.
But what I am is the showstopper, the headliner, the main event, the icon of the WWE. Yours truly, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
I was a shy, very quiet kid. No one was more surprised than the people who really knew me back home in Texas about this line of work that I was in. In the wrestling business, we have good guys and bad guys, or as we used to reference it, heels and baby faces. The opportunity came for me to be a heel. As I turned into a heel, and I began to sort of go on this journey of who this character, this gimmick would be, it just continued to grow. And it certainly unleashed in me this side of where I could just go out there and do absolutely anything. But it came out through, honestly, through drugs and alcohol. It was the only way that I had the ability to show any type of personality other than the shy, quiet kid. We used to say things, or certainly I said things like, hey man, I only party when I'm on the road. Okay, we're on the road 250 plus days a year. Hello. you know, I got into wrestling at 19. I hadn't even really found out who I was as a man yet. They all just sort of melded into one, and I didn't know where Shawn Hickenbottom ended and Shawn Michaels began, to be perfectly honest. As if the marriage and everything didn't happen fast enough. 6 weeks after we're married, we find out she's pregnant. And now by this time, she's realized that the little partying that she saw me doing is not just a little thing. It's like he does that every day. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got 9 months to clean up. The baby is born. On many levels, I can grasp that it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, but I still don't have the ability to turn into this man that I need to become. She's continuing to go to Bible study, and she's just changing, and I don't know, there's just something about her as all this is going on. She's not pushing me anymore towards anything. She's just an unbelievable mom and an unbelievable wife. So I'm yearning to be a better husband for her. So it's the weekend and I'm getting myself into a little bit of a haze. My son's crawling on me and I can hear him faintly say, "Daddy's tired." And for the first time ever, I realize, he's 2 and he can now see that there's a difference in me. And it just hits me like a ton of bricks, like, oh my goodness. He sees it now. I mean, and of course I can flash back to remembering he got 9 months. And all these times of I'm going to change, I'm going to change. It's like 2 years later, 3 years later. I can't do this anymore. It bothered me so much. Lo and behold, one day I find myself in the parking lot of Cornerstone Church. I'm drawn to this place. I know that the good Lord is trying to tell me something, and I know it's in that big building. And I said, look, I'm looking for a Bible study. The lady looks up at me, and I think she thinks at first I'm there to rob the place. This gentleman sticks his head out of his office. He's their computer guy. He says, "You can come to mine." And he goes, "Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, I'll give you directions to my house." Well, he tells me, "Look, Sean, to be a part of this Bible study, you've got to accept Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior. Would you like that?" And I said, something, I think I would. This feeling comes over me that it's like, they discipled me. My life was never, it's never been the same. And I never touched another drug. It's so funny, I came home, I'm like, oh my goodness, the greatest thing ever. I'm driving home, I come in the door, I said, "Honey, I know what it is. It's Jesus, I'm saved." And I tell her everything that happened. She looked at me and she goes, "I know." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "This whole time," I've been trying to figure out. She said, "Look, I've known all along." She said, "But you needed to find this on your own." She said, "I was just so worried that if I pushed it, it wouldn't happen." And then she begins to tell me how all those nights after I passed out, she'd go in the closet, she'd pray for me. And of course, it is, whatever it is, 15 years later, and I still get, I'm just holding them back. I'm holding them back. When I was a horrific wretch, didn't pine away at me, she went in there, into that closet, and prayed for me. I don't think there's any greater thing you can do for somebody.
There's a superstar in that video, but it's not Shawn Michaels. It's his wife, Rebecca, because she didn't quit. She wanted for him to know Jesus like she did. And every time he showed up drunk, he let her down. She went into a closet to pray. And she didn't quit. He found Jesus that way. My question is, when you're just tired and you feel like you're not making any difference, you're not seeing any hope for change, are you going to remain persistent? You're going to follow through? There's a lot of famous quitters out there, but I wonder if we can commit to following the footsteps of some famous non-quitters, not just like Jesus, but like Florence Chadwick. Yes, the same Florence Chadwick we talked about at the beginning of the sermon. She'd been first inspired to distance swim after she read about another female, Gertrude Edery, who was the first woman ever to swim the 23 miles across the English Channel. And Florence said, "You know what, I want to be like that. In fact, I want to set the record. I'm going to be the first woman to swim both directions, back to back." And so she went and moved to Saudi Arabia. She was working in an oil company, and she would train before and after work. And every weekend she trained for 10 hours swimming in and across the Persian Gulf. And in 1950, she quit her job, moved to France, and started trying to get sponsors. The problem was nobody knew her, and so none of her applications garnered any attention. But she was still undeterred. And so she decided in the August of that year, 1950, after 2 years of training, that she was going to swim across the English Channel both ways. She ended up not only accomplishing it, but breaking the record that was set 24 years before her. So then fast forward to where we started. 2 years later, she attempted to swim from Catalina Island off the California coast all the way to the coastline. A thick fog set in, and she was unable to finish. Reporter had asked her, so why did you quit, Florence? She said, "Look, I'm not excusing myself, but if I could have seen land, if I could have just seen land, I know I could have made it. But the fog moved in and my hope moved out." She waited 2 months to try again. And when she tried again, during this second swim between the Catalina Island and the coast, the same thick fog set in again. This is like her worst nightmare come true. But this time, with intense resolve, Florence made it to the coast. You know why? She would later say that she couldn't see it, but she could imagine it in her mind's eye, what the coast looked like. She had that picture in her mind, and she just kept swimming to the shoreline, and she reached her goal. You got to have a clear goal. You got to have a clear vision of where you're trying to get to. You got to have hope that you can reach it. Jesus had a clear goal. The Bible says in Luke chapter 9, verse 41, that Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He was going to die for all of the human race in order that we might be able to get to go to heaven. He was going to prepare a place for all those who would put their faith in him to live with him forever. Knowing he would die and that he would suffer, he still was persistent to reach his goal no matter what. And he invites you and me to follow him, to be like him, which means we need to have that clear goal and we need to be persistent no matter what. Or as the writer of Hebrews says in chapter 12, verses 1-3, we are surrounded by a great cloud of people whose lives tell us what faith means. Many of them, he said in chapter 11, had died for their faith. So let us run the race that's before us and never give up. We should remove from our lives anything that would get in the way and the sin that easily holds us back, and let us look only to Jesus, the one who began our faith and who makes it perfect. He suffered death on a cross, but he accepted the shame as if it were nothing because of the joy that God put before him. And now he's sitting at the right hand of God's throne. Think about Jesus' example. He held on while wicked people were doing evil things to him. So you and me, don't get tired. Don't stop trying. When we think about Jesus' example and the goal that he had in mind, to get to heaven, to make a way for as many people to join him as possible, man, I can't think of anything better for you and me to commit to. That we would follow Jesus to the very end of our lives, and that you and I will take as many people as possible to heaven with us. Let's pray. Father, I'm thankful that we can get a little insight into how Jesus faced suffering and death. And at the end of the day, it was because of his confidence in you and your plan for him. The joy set before him of having every one of his followers with him forever. Father, I pray that you would keep our minds from getting stuck on things that are short-sighted. Short-term, temporary goals, fulfilling our own appetites, just like our culture chases after. I pray, God, instead that you might give us eyes to see what you have mapped out for each of us. Who are the people? Who is the person that you wanted us to lead to Christ? It might be because of an invitation to church, or it might be just the way we live our lives, or it might be relentless invitations, opportunities to share what we've experienced. But whatever it is, may we not give up because you want them in heaven. May we not abandon the faith that we have and turn our backs, become enemies of the cross just because we quit. And Lord, for some, you know how hard it is right now. You know how absolutely devastating that suffering feels. To be rejected by friends, to be at odds with family, to face all kinds of losses that we do. God, protect us from the temptation to believe that somehow that means that we're not on the right path. Help us to fix our eyes on you and help us to claim what future you have laid out before us as our own. Most of all, thank you for Jesus, for his example. Thank you that he didn't quit. Help us to be more like him. We ask in his name. Amen.